When my boss tried to push me out, I got my revenge by exposing his ties to a rival company, and it cost him everything. The day I closed the Meridian deal was the day I thought my career had finally reached its peak. As I stood in that sleek conference room, watching the CEO of Meridian Enterprises sign a contract worth $4.2 million, the largest in our company's history, I felt invincible. The champagne flowed freely, congratulations poured in from colleagues, and the pride on my face must have been visible from space. At 32, I had become the youngest senior account manager at Pinnacle Solutions, breaking records and glass ceilings with equal fervor. Elena Parker, our CEO, Marcus Finley, had announced at the celebration party, his arm over my shoulder, is what the future of Pinnacle looks like. I remember catching Richard Hale's eye across the room as Marcus spoke. Richard, my direct supervisor and the head of client relations, raised his glass with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Success can make you blind to the dangers lurking in the shadows. The Meridian deal was just the latest in a string of victories I'd secured for Pinnacle over the past year. We specialized in high-end technology consulting services, guiding Fortune 500 companies through digital transformations. I had a knack for understanding exactly what clients needed, sometimes before they knew it themselves. My portfolio had grown to include 12 major accounts, each bringing in between $1 and $4 million annually. The commission checks alone had allowed me to finally buy my dream apartment in the city and start investing in my future. Life was good, life was perfect. Until it wasn't. The first cancellation came 3 weeks after the Meridian celebration. I was reviewing quarterly projections when my phone rang. It was Janet Cooper, my contact at Westridge Financial, one of my first major clients and someone I considered a friend in the industry. Elena, I hate to do this over the phone, Janet began, her voice uncharacteristically formal, but we've decided to terminate our contract with Pinnacle, effective immediately. The air left my lungs in a rush. Janet, what? We just finalized the expansion plan last month. What happened? It's complicated. Upper management feels we need to move in a different direction. Can we meet to discuss this? I'm sure whatever concerns you have, we can address them. I'm sorry, Elena. The decision's been made. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I shouldn't say this, but this came from above me. Way above. I fought for you, but the line went dead before I could respond. I sat motionless, staring at the quarterly projections that were now oscillate. Westridge represented nearly $2 million in annual revenue. It was a significant loss, but I told myself these things happened. Clients come and go. I would find a replacement. But then Archer Pharmaceuticals canceled 2 days later, and Blue Sky Technologies the day after that. By the end of the week, 5 of my 12 clients had terminated their contracts, all giving similar vague explanations about changing directions or restructuring priorities. The whispers started in the break room, then migrated to the open office floor. I caught fragments as I walked past groups of colleagues who suddenly found their coffee cups fascinating when I approached. Unbelievable how quickly she's losing control. Heard the Meridian deal is shaky now too. Maybe she just got lucky before. I threw myself into damage control, reaching out to the remaining clients, reassuring them of our commitment and value. Most seemed satisfied, even enthusiastic about our ongoing work. But the damage to my reputation within Pinnacle was spreading like wildfire. During our weekly department meeting, I had to report the losses. I prepared meticulously, creating a detailed presentation on market fluctuations, industry trends, and a robust strategy for client retention and acquisition. As I stood before my colleagues, I could feel their judgment. Richard sat at the head of the table, watching me with an expression of what appeared to be concern. These losses, while significant, are not insurmountable, I concluded my presentation. I've already lined up meetings with 3 potential new clients, and I'm confident we can— Thank you, Elena, Richard interrupted smoothly. Your optimism is commendable. However, I think we need to be realistic about the situation. He turned to address the room. Losing 5 major accounts in a single week is unprecedented for our department. We need to understand what went wrong before we can move forward. The implication was clear. I had done something wrong. My face burned as I returned to my seat. After the meeting, Richard called me into his office. The space was meticulously organized, with awards and achievements displayed prominently on the walls, a shrine to his 15 years at Pinnacle. "Elena," he began, leaning forward with his fingers steepled beneath his chin, "I want you to know I'm on your side here." "Thank you, Richard. I appreciate that. This kind of setback can happen to anyone, even the most seasoned professionals." His tone was sympathetic, but something in his eyes made me uneasy. Perhaps the promotion to senior account manager came a bit too soon. I stiffened. "My performance has been exemplary, until now. 1 week of unusual client activity doesn't erase a year of record-breaking deals." "Of course not," he said smoothly. "But maybe the pressure of handling so many high-profile accounts is taking its toll. There's no shame in stepping back to regroup." "I don't need to step back," I said firmly. "I need to understand why these clients suddenly left without warning." Richard sighed, as if I was being difficult. "Sometimes clients just move on, Elena. It's not personal." But it felt personal, extremely personal. As I turned to leave his office, I caught a glimpse of his reflection in the glass cabinet near the door. The mask of concern had slipped, replaced by something that looked remarkably like satisfaction. A subtle smirk played on his lips, there and gone in an instant. That night, I sat in my beautiful apartment that now felt too expensive, too presumptuous. I scrolled through emails from the canceled clients, searching for clues, warnings I might have missed. There was nothing, just praise and enthusiasm right up until the moment they walked away. My phone pinged with a message from Marcus, our CEO. "Elena, let's meet tomorrow to discuss recent developments. 9 a.m. My office." The message sent a chill through me. CEOs don't schedule one-on-one meetings with senior account managers to discuss recent developments unless something is seriously wrong. I poured myself a generous glass of wine and tried to prepare for what felt increasingly like the beginning of the end of my career at Pinnacle. What I couldn't have known then was that this wasn't the end of anything. It was just the beginning of a corporate chess match that would test every skill I possessed, every relationship I'd built, and ultimately reveal the true nature of the man I called my boss. And Richard Hale had no idea who he was really dealing with. The meeting with Marcus wasn't as disastrous as I'd feared, but it wasn't reassuring either. He expressed concern about the client exodus, but gave me a month to stabilize the situation. 1 month to save my career. "Elena, you've been exceptional until now," he said, his brow furrowed. "Richard suggested we might need to reassess your role, but I convinced him to give you time to turn things around." I left his office with my job intact, but the distinct feeling that Richard had already poisoned the well. The mention that he'd convinced Richard, not the other way around, sent alarm bells ringing. Since when did a department head have that much influence over the CEO? The next few weeks became an exercise in psychological warfare. Richard called me into his office almost daily for what he termed strategy sessions, but which felt more like subtle interrogations. "I've been thinking," he said during one such meeting, leaning back in his leather chair. "Maybe the high-profile accounts are creating too much pressure. There's no shame in acknowledging when you're in over your head." "I'm not in over my head," I replied evenly, though my hands clenched beneath the table. "The remaining clients are completely satisfied with my work." He smiled thinly. "For now. But prevention is better than cure, isn't it? I've taken the liberty of reassigning the Meridian account to Tyler. Tyler Foster was a competent account manager, but he had half my experience and none of my relationship with Meridian." "You did what?" I fought to keep my voice level. "It's for the best, Elena. You can focus on rebuilding with smaller clients." His tone was reasonable, concerned even, but his eyes were cold. "We all have setbacks. The question is how we respond to them." This became the new pattern. Each day, another piece of my client portfolio was chipped away, always presented as being for my benefit. Each time, Richard made it sound like he was doing me a favor, protecting me from further failure. The gaslighting extended beyond our private meetings. In team settings, he would ask my opinion on a client matter, then subtly undermine my response. "That's an interesting perspective, Elena," he would say with a slight head tilt. "Perhaps a bit unorthodox, but we appreciate your unique approach." By the third week, HR entered the picture. Marissa Chen, the HR director, invited me to what she called a career development discussion. "Richard has expressed some concerns about your current workload," she began, consulting her notes. He feels you might benefit from a transitional period, perhaps moving back to a regular account manager position until you feel more prepared for senior responsibilities. My stomach dropped. Marissa, my performance was exemplary until this mysterious client exodus. Don't you find the timing suspicious? She shifted uncomfortably. Lena, sometimes success can be difficult to maintain. There's no shame in stepping back temporarily. The same phrase Richard kept using, no shame. As if my pride was the issue, not the cinematic dismantling of my career. I left the HR meeting with a performance improvement plan in hand and rage simmering beneath my professional smile. That night, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by client files, searching for patterns, for anything I might have missed. Doubt crept in like a poison. Had I become complacent? Was I truly failing? The gaslighting was working. I was beginning to question my own competence. My phone lit up with a text from Janet, my former contact at Westridge Financial. "How are you holding up? I feel terrible about everything." I called her immediately. "Janet, please? What really happened? Why did Westridge leave?" She hesitated. "Elena, I shouldn't be talking to you about this, but I respect you too much to let you think it was your fault. It wasn't. Someone went above me, convinced our CFO that another firm could offer better terms." "What firm?" I pressed. "I can't say more. I'm sorry." She hung up. Another piece of the puzzle, but still not enough to see the full picture. I needed to stay late, dig through records, find something concrete. The opportunity came the following evening, when most of the office had emptied out for a company-sponsored happy hour. I begged off, claiming deadlines. As I worked in my office, the quiet of the nearly empty floor was broken by Richard's voice. He must have skipped the happy hour too. I froze, listening to his muffled conversation from his office across the hall. The door was ajar, and his voice carried just enough for me to catch fragments. "Transition will be complete by month's end. Yes, I've already moved Meridian. Parker suspects nothing. Substantial compensation for bringing over the remaining accounts." My blood ran cold. I edged closer to my door, straining to hear more. "Apex Consulting values, loyalty, percentage of each account transferred. Yes, Disfrena's vital until I formally announce my departure. Apex Consulting. Our biggest competitor." The phone call ended, and I quickly retreated to my desk. Moments later, Richard walked past my office, startling slightly when he saw me. "Elena, working late?" I forced a defeated smile. "Just trying to salvage what I can." He nodded, seemingly pleased by my apparent resignation. "Don't stay too late. Sometimes we have to accept when things aren't working out." As he walked away, a new clarity washed over me. I wasn't failing. I was being sabotaged. And now I knew why. The game had changed, and Richard had no idea who he was playing against. Richard's late-night phone call had confirmed my suspicions, but suspicions alone wouldn't be enough. I needed concrete evidence of his betrayal. Evidence that would stand up to scrutiny from the board and potentially in court. The next morning, I arrived at the office with a plan and a renewed sense of purpose. Step 1. Contact my former clients without alerting Richard. I created a new email account under the name Alexandra Bennett and crafted a simple but effective cover story. Alexandra would be a potential client researching consulting firms for her company's digital transformation. I composed carefully worded emails to contacts at each of the companies that had abruptly terminated their contracts with Pinnacle. Most ignored my inquiries or sent polite brush-offs. But Tanya Rodriguez from Archer Pharmaceuticals replied within hours, agreeing to a quick phone call. I used my personal phone and took the call from my car during lunch. "Ms. Bennett, I'm happy to share my experiences," Tanya began after I explained my fictitious situation. "I've worked with several consulting firms over the years. I'm considering both Pinnacle Solutions and Apex Consulting," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I understand Archer recently switched from one to the other." There was a pause. "Yes, that's correct. We had a long relationship with Pinnacle before moving to Apex." "May I ask why you made the switch?" "I'm trying to make an informed decision." Tanya hesitated. "Well, we were quite satisfied with Pinnacle, actually. Our account manager, Elena Parker, was exceptional. But..." I held my breath. Their head of client relations, Richard Hale, approached our CFO directly. He suggested that Archer might benefit from more specialized services that Apex could provide. He was quite persuasive, mentioning that he had a close relationship with Apex and could personally ensure a smooth transition. My hands tightened around the phone. That's interesting. It sounds like he was almost representing both companies. It was unusual, Tanya admitted, lowering her voice. Between us, it felt like he was straddling both sides somehow. He implied he'd be involved with our account regardless of which firm we chose. After thanking Tanya, I sat in my car, pulse racing. This was it, confirmation that Richard had actively poached my clients. But I needed more. I needed to understand the full extent of his connection to Apex. That evening, I stayed late again, waiting until Richard left before slipping into his office. I knew this crossed ethical lines, but so did sabotaging your own company. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, perhaps a contract with Apex, incriminating emails, anything that would prove his dual loyalty. His computer was locked, of course, but his desk drawers were not. In the bottom drawer beneath a stack of quarterly reports, I found a burner phone, separate from his company and personal devices. The call history showed numerous calls to the same number. I copied it down, then carefully replaced everything exactly as I'd found it. The next day, I used a public library computer to search for information about Apex Consulting. Their website listed their executive team, but Richard's name was nowhere to be found. However, when I dug into recent news about the company, I discovered something interesting. Apex had received a significant investment from a private equity firm called Hawthorne Ventures 6 months ago. Further research revealed that Hawthorne Ventures was managed by a man named David Hale, Richard's brother. The pieces were falling into place, but I needed digital evidence. On a hunch, I searched for email accounts associated with Richard's name. Most were dead ends, but when I tried combinations with his brother's company, I hit the jackpot. WriteHale@hawthorneven.com. Using an email verification tool, I confirmed it was active. But how to access it? I tried several password combinations based on what I knew about Richard. His birthday, his alma mater, his wife's name. Nothing worked. Then I remembered the password he used for the company's VPN, which he'd once entered while presenting at a meeting. I tried a variation, Hawkeye P1ACL. I was in. The shared email account contained months of correspondence between Richard and Apex executives. The arrangement was clear. Richard would receive a 15% finder's fee for each Pinnacle client he brought to Apex, plus a guaranteed executive position once he'd transferred enough business to justify his departure from Pinnacle. There were detailed lists of my clients, complete with notes on how to approach them and what to offer. Richard had systematically targeted my portfolio while leaving his other managers' clients untouched. The most damning email was dated just after my Meridian success. Parker's becoming too visible too quickly. We need to move the timeline up. Start the extraction process next week. Target her largest accounts first to create maximum impact. I forwarded the entire email history to my personal account, then carefully logged out. As I drove home that night, my hurt and confusion had transformed into cold, focused anger. Richard hadn't just betrayed me. He'd betrayed the entire company, the clients who trusted him, and every colleague who reported to him. Now I had the evidence, but I wasn't going to rush. Richard had played a long game, and so would I. Armed with evidence of Richard's betrayal, my first instinct was to march straight to Marcus's office and expose everything. But that would be playing my hand too early. Richard was well connected at Pinnacle. He'd been there for 15 years and had carefully cultivated relationships with everyone who mattered. If I moved too quickly with insufficient proof, he could easily dismiss my claims as the desperate accusations of a failing employee. No, I needed to be strategic. I needed to make my case bulletproof. First, I created a secure digital vault where I stored copies of all the evidence I'd gathered, screenshots of Richard's secret email exchanges, notes from my conversation with Tanya Rodriguez, and the connection between Apex and Richard's brother's investment firm. I backed everything up on multiple encrypted drives. Next, I reached out to Janet from Westridge again, this time with specific information. I know about Richard's arrangement with Apex, I told her bluntly when we met for coffee far from both our offices. I know he approached your CFO directly. Her eyes widened. Elena, I can't discuss this. You don't have to. Just listen. I slid a blank notepad toward her. If you were to write a statement about what happened, completely hypothetically, what might it say? She stared at the notepad for a long moment before picking up the pen. When she slid it back, she'd written, Richard offered our CFO a personal kickback of 5% on all future projects if we moved to Apex. Said he would be heading their expansion division by year-end. Threatened to make things difficult with our current Pinnacle projects if we didn't comply. I nodded and tucked the notepad away. Thank you. I may need to call on you later. Over the next 2 weeks, I methodically built my case. I documented every interaction with Richard, every client, reassignment, every undermining comment in meetings. I tracked his calls and meetings, noting when they coincided with new client losses. I even managed to obtain financial records showing unusual deposits to his personal account that aligned perfectly with the timeline of my client departures. But all of this was still circumstantial in the eyes of those who trusted Richard implicitly. I needed to catch him in the act to create a situation where his betrayal would be undeniable. The opportunity presented itself when an old contact from business school reached out about potentially bringing her company, Quantum Dynamics, Pinnacle. Caroline Wu was now the CTO of a rising tech firm with substantial consulting needs. Under normal circumstances, this would be exactly the kind of new business that could help me rebuild my portfolio and reputation. Instead, I saw it as the perfect bait for my trap. Caroline, I said during our initial call, I'd be thrilled to bring Quantum on as a client, but I need to ask a favor first. I laid out a simplified version of my situation and what I needed from her. She was reluctant at first, but our old friendship and her strong sense of justice eventually won out. Just to be clear, she said, you want me to express interest in Pinnacle, let you set up preliminary meetings, and then see if this Richard guy approaches me to switch to Apex instead? Exactly. And if he does, I need you to play along enough to get him to reveal his connection. The trap was set. I announced the potential new client at our next team meeting, making sure to emphasize the size of the account potentially larger than Meridian. Richard's eyes lit up with barely concealed interest. Excellent work, Elena, he said, his tone patronizing. Perhaps you're turning things around after all. I'd like to sit in on the initial meetings, given the importance of this potential client. Of course, I replied, feigning gratitude for his support. The first meeting with Caroline went perfectly. She played her role flawlessly, asking insightful questions and expressing enthusiasm about working with Pinnacle. Richard was charming and professional, though I caught him studying Caroline with calculated interest. 3 days later, Caroline called me. Your boss reached out to me directly, she said. Asked if I had time for a confidential discussion about optimizing Quantum's consulting strategy. We're meeting tomorrow at 7 p.m. at the Reserve. The Reserve was an upscale restaurant, known for its private dining rooms, perfect for conversations that needed to stay secret. Prepared Caroline with specific questions to ask, topics to raise that would prompt Richard to reveal his true intentions. Then I did something Richard would never expect. I booked the adjacent private dining room for a client dinner that didn't actually exist. The Reserve's private rooms had thin walls, a design flaw I'd discovered during a previous business dinner when I could clearly hear the conversation next door. More importantly, I brought a small recording device, setting it up in my empty room where it would capture every word from Richard's meeting with Caroline. That evening, I sat alone in my darkened private dining room, listening as Richard methodically betrayed Pinnacle yet again. Apex can offer substantially better terms than what we discussed at Pinnacle, he told Caroline smoothly. And I can personally guarantee exceptional service since I'll be overseeing your account directly once I make my move. Your move? Caroline asked, following my script perfectly. Between us, I'll be joining Apex as their Executive Vice President of Client Relations within the next month. I'm bringing several key Pinnacle clients with me. It would be simpler for Quantum to just start there directly rather than having to transition later. Every word was being recorded, clear, damning, and exactly what I needed. The trap had sprung perfectly, and Richard had no idea he'd just signed his own professional death warrant. The quarterly board meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning, the perfect stage for Richard's exposure. Not coincidentally, it was also the meeting where his promotion to Executive Vice President was to be announced. A fact he'd been subtly flaunting all week. What Richard didn't know was that I had requested a slot on the agenda through Marcus's assistant, claiming I wanted to present a strategic analysis of recent client transitions. I arrived an hour early, setting up my laptop and checking the audio system. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the electric anticipation of justice about to be served. I had rehearsed this presentation dozens of times, anticipating every possible reaction, every attempt Richard might make to discredit me. Board members and executives filtered in gradually, making small talk over coffee. Richard arrived 15 minutes before the meeting, looking confident in an expensive new suit that I suspected was purchased in anticipation of his promotion. He nodded at me with casual dismissal, as if I were merely a minor inconvenience he'd soon be leaving behind. "Quite the formal setup you have there, Elena," he remarked, gesturing to my laptop and the presentation materials. "I hope this analysis of yours isn't too time-consuming. We have important company business to address." "Don't worry, Richard," I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I wouldn't dream of taking up more time than necessary. Marcus called the meeting to order, welcoming everyone and moving efficiently through the initial agenda items. Richard sat attentively, occasionally glancing at his watch. Finally, Marcus announced, "Before we move to our final items, Elena Parker has requested some time to present an analysis. Elena, the floor is yours." I stood, smoothing my skirt and stepping to the front of the room. "Thank you, Marcus. Distinguished board members, what I'm about to present isn't the analysis you were expecting. Instead, it's evidence of a systematic betrayal of Pinnacle Solutions by one of our most trusted executives." Richard's smug expression faltered. Several board members straightened in their chairs. "Over the past month, 12 major clients have terminated their contracts with Pinnacle," I continued. "This wasn't due to market conditions or dissatisfaction with our services. It was the result of deliberate sabotage and client poaching by head of client relations, Richard Hale, who has been secretly working with our competitor, Apex Consulting." "This is absurd," Richard interjected, forcing a laugh. "Elena has been struggling with client retention and is clearly trying to deflect blame for her failures." I locked eyes with him. "Is it absurd, Richard? Is it absurd that you've been receiving commission payments from Apex for every client you've directed their way? Is it absurd that your brother's investment firm, Hawthorne Ventures, recently became a major stakeholder in Apex? Is it absurd that you've been planning to join Apex as executive vice president while still employed here?" The room fell silent. Richard's face drained of color. "These are serious allegations," Marcus said gravely. "Do you have evidence to support them?" "I do." I clicked to my first slide, displaying the email thread between Richard and Apex executives. This is Richard's secret email account, where he discusses the extraction of Pinnacle clients and his compensation for delivering them to Apex. I advanced through the slides methodically, showing financial records, client testimonies, and the connection to Hawthorne Ventures. Board members leaned forward, expressions shifting from skepticism to shock and then to anger. "This could be fabricated," Richard said desperately, but his voice lacked conviction. "Perhaps, but this can't be." I played the audio recording from the Reserve restaurant. Richard's voice filled the room, crystal clear as he promised Caroline direct oversight of her account once he made his move to Apex. "And to verify this isn't some elaborate deepfake," I added, "I have signed statements from 3 former clients confirming Richard approached them directly to orchestrate their transition to Apex." Richard lunged to his feet. "This is a setup. She's trying to destroy me because she couldn't handle the pressure." "Sit down, Richard," Marcus ordered, his voice ice cold. "Is there anything you'd like to say in your defense before we continue?" Richard looked around the room, finding no allies among the faces that once respected him. "I've given 15 years to this company," he said weakly. "Everything I did was to enrich yourself at our expense," Marcus finished for him. "To betray the trust of everyone in this room while undermining our business from within." The next few minutes unfolded with the swift, brutal efficiency of a corporate execution. The board voted unanimously to terminate Richard effective immediately. Security was called to escort him from the building. His company phone, laptop, and access cards were confiscated on the spot. As Richard was led past me toward the door, his face contorted with hatred. "You think you've won?" he hissed under his breath. "You have no idea what you've started." "No, Richard," I replied quietly. "I finished what you started." After Richard's departure, Marcus addressed the stunned room. "I'd like to thank Elena for her courage and diligence in uncovering this betrayal. The damage Richard has done is substantial, but not irreparable." He turned to me. "Elena, We'll need your help rebuilding the client relationships that were compromised. And in light of these developments, I believe we need to reconsider the leadership of our client relations department. As the meeting adjourned, board members approached me one by one, offering congratulations and apologies in equal measure. The HR director, who had tried to ease me into a demotion, now couldn't meet my eyes. Colleagues who had whispered about my incompetence now praised my investigative skills. But as I packed up my materials, I felt strangely hollow. This wasn't just about vindication or revenge. It was about justice for me, for Pinnacle, and for the clients who had been manipulated in Richard's self-serving scheme. The real work was just beginning. The aftermath of Richard's explosive termination sent shockwaves through Pinnacle Solutions. The legal department moved swiftly, filing a lawsuit against both Richard and Apex Consulting for corporate espionage, breach of fiduciary duty, and tortious interference with business relationships. The scandal made headlines in industry publications, with Pinnacle positioning itself as the victim of calculated betrayal rather than a company in decline. 3 days after the board meeting, Marcus called me into his office. The strain of the past week showed on his face, but there was a renewed energy in his eyes. "Elena, I've spoken with the board," he began, gesturing for me to take a seat. "We unanimously agree that you've demonstrated extraordinary loyalty and leadership under the most challenging circumstances. We'd like to offer you Richard's position as head of client relations, effective immediately." I'd anticipated this offer, but hadn't decided how to respond. The validation was sweet, vindication in its purest form, but something had shifted inside me during my investigation of Richard. I'd glimpsed a different future, one that hadn't been visible before. "I'm honored by your offer, Marcus," I said carefully, "but I'd like to propose an alternative arrangement." His eyebrows rose. "I'm listening." "I believe I can best serve Pinnacle as an independent consultant, focused specifically on recovering the clients Richard diverted to Apex. I have relationships with those clients that could help bring them back. But I've also been thinking beyond that. I outlined my vision, a new consultancy specializing in corporate loyalty and ethics, with Pinnacle as my first client. I would help them rebuild their client base, while simultaneously establishing my own firm. Marcus listened thoughtfully. "You're turning down a guaranteed executive position to start your own company in this economic climate?" "I am," I confirmed. What Richard did revealed a vulnerability in how the industry operates. Companies need guidance on how to protect themselves from exactly this type of corporate sabotage. I believe I'm uniquely positioned to provide that guidance now. After further discussion, we reached an agreement. I would work as an independent consultant for Pinnacle for 6 months while establishing my new firm, Parker Integrity Consulting. The news about Richard continued to unfold over the following weeks. The lawsuit against him and Apex became increasingly damaging as Reservoir revealed the full extent of his scheme. Apex's stock plummeted as investors lost confidence in a company willing to engage in such unethical business practices. Richard's professional reputation, once sterling, was destroyed overnight. No reputable firm would touch him with the lawsuit pending and the evidence so damning. His brother's investment firm, Hawthorne Ventures, also faced scrutiny for its role in the arrangement, with several major investors withdrawing their funds. Meanwhile, I reached out to each of the clients Richard had poached. Janet at Westridge Financial was the first to respond, eager to return to Pinnacle once she learned the full story. "I always felt something was off about how Richard approached us," she admitted during our meeting, "but we never imagined it was part of something so calculated." One by one, the clients returned, some to Pinnacle directly, others as clients of my new consultancy. Each return felt like another small victory, another piece of justice restored. 6 months after Richard's termination, Parker Integrity Consulting had grown from a one-woman operation to a team of 5, with Pinnacle as our anchor client and a waiting list of companies seeking our expertise in corporate loyalty and ethics. I had moved out of my apartment into a small house with a dedicated home office, a symbol of my new independence. The final piece of closure came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. My phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Elena Parker, speaking. "Miss Parker." The voice belonged to David Hale, Richard's brother. "I understand congratulations are in order for your new venture." I remained silent, waiting. "My brother made serious mistakes," he continued. "Mistakes that have cost us both dearly. Apex is filing for Chapter 11 next week. and the lawsuit has drained my personal resources. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, not entirely truthfully. What can I do for you, Mr. Hale? Richard asked me to deliver a message. He said you should know that he regrets underestimating you, but not what he did. He still believes he would have succeeded if I hadn't been smarter than he anticipated. I finished for him. Thank you for the message, Mr. Hale. I wish you both well in your future endeavors. I hung up without waiting for his response. Richard's final message was a gift, confirmation that even in his downfall, he hadn't learned the right lesson. He regretted being caught, not his betrayal. That evening, I stood on my back porch, watching the sunset with a glass of wine in hand. The journey from rising star to pariah to successful entrepreneur had been tumultuous, but strangely perfect in its outcome. Richard had tried to bury me, never realizing he was planting a seed instead. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's thriving in ways they never imagined possible, and creating something meaningful from the ashes of their betrayal. In trying to end my career, Richard had inadvertently helped me find my true calling, and that was the sweetest justice of all.